weapon, guy face, all faces, weapons, faces, and then right to Bob. We continue over, and we have another taser guy in this side, with two more guys with guns coming in. They'll start crawling away toward me. 1, 2, 3. Go.
Tie that in! Get in there!
This thing then, drop to grab this thing then.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Get it. Pull them all the way in. All the way in. All the way in.
Gary, pull them in.
All the way in. Oh, that's great. That's great. That's a cut right there. Great. Fabulous. Okay. Great. It was very important to me to be a kid directing Jurassic Park, because like most kids, one of my first longest words was Triceratops, Stegosaurus. My dad would always take me to see the dinosaurs in Philadelphia, the Franklin Institute of Technology. There was a natural history museum there with big dinosaur bones. And so I made that movie really as a youngster, remembering how much fun it was to imagine with such yearning that someday wouldn't it be great to run into a dinosaur and meet up with one without being eaten by it. And I just remember making the movie with that philosophy. For everybody that had ever wondered and been fascinated with that whole era of the dinosaur, I want to make a movie for all those dinosaur lovers.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park. The most advanced amusement park in the entire world.
What do they got in there, King Kong?
We've made living biological attractions so astounding that they'll capture the imagination of the entire planet.
How do you do this? I'll show you.
Very good. Push. Very good.
God.
Jurassic Park wasn't a monster movie. It was a movie about animals long ago gone extinct that through the miracle of science and technology are brought into the 20th century. And that's what Michael Crichton had conceived in this amazing book he wrote. And all of a sudden, the second I read his book, I realized that we weren't dealing with monsters, and this was not going to be a genre of horror, science fiction, fantasy, or back to the famous Monsters of Filmland magazine culture. But instead, this was a really credible look at how dinosaurs might someday be brought back right alongside modern mankind. And that really fascinated me, and that immediately set my own template for not making this a monster movie.
Roll, big, marker, and background. Action.
One of the things that the book deals with, and the film too, and one of the sort of shaping concepts, is that this kind of research is tremendously expensive. And the question arises, who will pay for it? And at the moment, for better or worse, there isn't any pressing need to recreate a dinosaur. And in trying to think about how that might happen, or who would pay for it, the only thing that I could think of was that it would come from a desire for entertainment.
We can charge anything we want, $2,000 a day, $10,000 a day, and people will pay it.
This park was not built to cater only for the super rich. Everyone in the world has the right to enjoy these animals.
Michael Crichton had come up with this spectacular notion that if you created a theme park where the DNA could recreate dinosaurs and you would have a place to keep them in an environment where people could feel safe, just like with other wild animals of the jungle, you could go and actually see a dinosaur.
Dilophosaurus.
It felt real, it felt extraordinary, and it had tremendous dramatic potential.
There's no doubt our attractions will drive kids out of their minds.
Well, I was planning to make the movie, as much as possible with full-size animatronic dinosaurs. And the only person on the face of the planet that could pull that off was Stan Winston. He had an amazing shop. He had great artisans, and he had great technologists working with him.
we're all dinosaur fans. Everyone who does the type of work we do is a dinosaur fan. So we said we'll do some drawings just to see if our concept and our feeling is in sync with what Steven's looking for in this film.
I was working for Stan Winston, who I had a very long career with, and Stan had us start designing dinosaurs. And Mark Crash McCreary was essential in that, and I was fortunate to have a hand in, coming up with color schemes and things like that.
The drawings I had done initially were more about action and kind of, this is the idea we want to ultimately to walk away with, is that, wow, these things were real animals that could think and move. And we went through a lot of iterations, just drawing-wise.
The ground floor of the process was to come up with the look of each dinosaur and to weave in information now that was coming out about the dinosaurs to try to make these as accurate as possible.
And look at the half-moon-shaped bones on the wrist. It's no wonder these guys learn how to fly.
Well, the first person we went to was Jack Horner, not just to achieve an authenticity, but we wanted a credible resource that could back up several theories that we were sort of expounding. And one was that dinosaurs eventually evolved into birds.
And even the word raptor means bird of prey.
And that's something that Jack Horner believes in and could defend if necessary. And Jack Horner became our credibility.
Then we started working on maquettes, and we had done a little small 1/16 scale Tyrannosaurus Rex maquette. Then we did a 5th scale maquette that had all of the details on it, so Steven could really see what it was going to be. And then we projected that up large.
You like it?
I love it.
It's coming along really good, isn't it?
The first time I saw the T-Rex was at Stan Winston's shop.
My kid would say, "Where does the poo-poo come from, Daddy?"
I had a chance to actually operate it myself, which was a thrill. Where the movements were so smooth and so authentic. When it would snap its head around, it didn't have a recoil. The head would go as fast as you can imagine and would come to a complete stop and look right at you. Its eyes would stereo focus right on you. That was absolutely frightening to watch. And he also kept it moving. Even when it was still, it was breathing, it had muscles flicking, and he kept every animal alive.
We were building all of the dinosaurs, all the animatronic ones, kind of in parallel because there was so much work to be done. We actually had a baby Triceratops going, which never made it to that movie. That scene got cut out. Plus, there's the famous scene in the movie where the big foot comes down into the mud. So that was going to become a separate animatronic piece.
The spitter, Velociraptors, the Brachiosaur, or the T-Rex. Stan could give them utterly authentic movements far beyond where we were technologically in 1973-74 with Jaws. But how we were going to get the dinosaurs to run, how we were going to get them to even be in the movie in wide shots was always going to be the old-fashioned way through stop-motion animation. The same way that Willis O'Brien made King Kong, just taking that little armature on a small maquette and just moving it just a millimeter at a time. And Phil Tippett was hired by me to do that because he was the best in the business.
The first call I got was from Kathy Kennedy at home. And I just finished working on this big stop-motion project. It was absolutely beat. And Kathy calls up and goes, she's all like perky, goes, "Hey, Phil, we got this really cool thing we're going to do with dinosaurs. It's really going to be a lot of fun." And I went like, "Yeah, really? Okay." Fine. And we all started to plan it out as the conventional stop-motion, go-motion, rod puppet, high speed with a little bit of computer graphics.
And then one day I got a call from Dennis Murin at ILM, who already had the job of doing Jurassic Park with Phil Tippett. And Dennis said that he thought that he could pull off a full-size dinosaur that would be authentic to the eye. And so he started doing tests. And the first tests he did was a whole herd of Gallimimus, just the skeletal structure of the Gallimimus, running through a still photograph of Hawaii. It was several angles of this. And it was so authentic and smooth, I actually said, well, that's the future. That's the way it's going to be from now on.
A couple of the guys, Steve Williams and Mark DePay, were trying to get even closer and do a T-Rex and see how that would work out. And it looked really successful. Then we decided, okay, let's go ahead and do a real shot. And Stefan Fangmeyer lit it, Steve animated it, and we got a shot that just knocked everybody out and was beyond what you could do with stop motion or anything else.
A videotape came from ILM, and we saw this image of what they had done, and we're just, wow, everything changed.
And this technology really kind of, changed my movie forever. And I think in that sense, changed the world forever.
It was April 20th, 1992. I remember we called it Black Monday because we got the word that production was going digital.
At that point in time, it's like an big emotional moment. It's like, when your dog dies. You know your dog's going to die, but when your dog dies, it like hits you really hard. Because it did seem like everything that I had built up until that time was like, we're not going to do it that way anymore.
It's like suddenly, here we are, we're extinct. We're the dinosaurs. And of course, that irony wasn't lost on any of us.
We're out of a job. Don't you mean extinct?
Because all the computer graphic guys were doing things like, I had no idea what they were doing, and it was just like a monitor and a mouse, and it was like, Jesus.
I'm a firm believer in whatever is the best technique to achieve a shot for the film is how it should be done. If it needs to be CGI, it should be. But if you can get it live in camera, then why not? Because some of the best acting comes from reacting.
It encouraged us to even work harder and, make everything that much more convincing in a realistic, on-stage puppet sense.
The reason that Steven still wanted, obviously, Phil involved was because he realized that his crew had information and experience that was just as important. It's just the toolbox had changed. So what was developed was the DID, or Dinosaur Input Device, which was a traditional stop-motion armature with motion encoders, which would translate anything we animated into a computer model. So it bridged the gap of stop-motion animation into the digital age.
It was exhilarating when we realized that there was a new way to do this and that we were going to be able to create a lifelike looking dinosaur on a level that we never before imagined, and that we were on to a whole new way of looking at Jurassic Park.
So you two dig up dinosaurs?
Well,
Try to.
I bring scientists, you bring a rock star. If you make a humorless movie about dinosaurs coming back to life in 1993, nobody's gonna care about your movie.
I think establishing characters like Laura Dern and Sam and Jeff, it lent a whole sense of credibility to the storytelling because you really believed that they were scientists.
why?
And did I go too fast? I go too fast. I did a flyby. No, give me that big glass of water. We're going to conduct an experiment.
Those characters, when they're postulating, better have a little wit. And David Koepp gave it all the wit. Gave Jeff Goldblum his lecherous crush on the paleobotanist played by Laura Dern. And with Sam Neill being right in the middle, watching this guy hitting on his girl, where Jeff doesn't even know that it's his girl. I mean, that was all David Koepp's kind of invention.
Hammer? Look at Alan, Kelly. Look at Alan, quickly.
We had to pretend to be scared, and Steven Spielberg going through a bullhorn, you know. So that was kind of more funny than anything. And the acting part was not laughing.
Very nice.
It's not easy.
The three of us are in the Jeep and we start to glance, and as we glanced in the tree and I'm supposed to look up at its neck, there was a giant paper X on it, you know, like a Sharpied X on a piece of white paper. And I just remember looking up like, okay, and that's the dinosaur.
You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
And we did close-ups, and I remember he'd never rehearsed. Ready, Jeff? Okay, there you are. You're seeing the dinosaur.
Oh my gosh, just keep rolling.
That looks great.
You're looking at it. You can't believe what you're seeing. Is it real? It now strikes you funny. You don't even know why. You know, and he's just talking me through it, and I'm kind of acting. I enjoyed that a lot.
You know, the first sort of few days of filming, you really had to get your bearings because it was all so new for us. I mean, just to be in sync with what we were looking at and what it would feel like and look like. We had no idea what we were going to see. Can we go see it? Can we go?
Yeah, relax. There's plenty of time this afternoon. My dear,
T-Rex.
welcome to Jurassic Park.
The actors certainly did their jobs, and they believed who they were, and that's all an audience needs, is to believe that the characters are believing in themselves, and that's what the actors did so well. We've been in pre-production for 50 million years on this movie, Jurassic Park, by golly.
He just hung out with us. He bonded with us. He played games with us a lot on the set. And in between playing games, he would throw in a question about our upcoming scene. And he worked with us so seamlessly that we would do anything for him in the performance on the scene.
So you really admire him. To you, he's like a movie star because of your interest in paleontology. This is everybody else's equivalent of a Tom Cruise or a Kevin Costner or a Sam Neill.
I think that he just had a lot of respect for kids and had a lot of respect for their talent, you know, and their intuition. I always felt so much freedom with him. I always felt like I was a part of the collaborative process, you know, that it wasn't just he was telling me what to do or he was talking down to me. It was always, what do you think? And what do you think we should do for this scene? And he trusted my ideas and he let me do that.
And then my teacher tells me about this other book by a guy named Backer.
Backer. And he said, slammed on his face, he slid. Good.
And it was that kind of relationship where I felt like a part of the gang rather than like an outsider looking in that I think brings out such great performances in children.
Grandpa!
Kids!
And I'm a big fan of Richard Attenborough's. I knew Dickie before I cast him in Jurassic Park and liked him a lot and just saw him as John Hammond. Let's get the camera right in here, see if we can get Richard right in here. Richard, you might have to, yeah, there we go, yes sir. Being an actor and a director, he knows to move that much farther to that side. You know, it was interesting to watch Hammond's character suddenly realizing that he might have gone mad. He doesn't utter those words, but he's certainly feeling, what have I done? And only Richard Attenborough, I think, could have pulled that off with such dignity and also with such tragedy.
Hold on to your butts. Sam Jackson was in it, you know, before he became a big star. You could tell Sam was going to get eaten by a dinosaur because they had him smoking earlier on when he's working.
How many lines of code are there?
About 2 million. And the guy that smokes always gets eaten. That's one rule about dinosaur films.
Oh, Mr. Arnold.
Because it takes place ostensibly on an island, we were thinking about shooting in Costa Rica. But Stephen was a little concerned about the infrastructure, that is, whether we'd have roads and whether we could get equipment there and other kinds of facilities that we would need. So we opted for a place where he had worked before, the island of Kauai in Hawaii. And that became the exterior jungles during the day.
For you. Hey, look!
Simply appropriate icon.
Are we gonna hit that?
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park was a tour attraction. It was about that. So each step that you got involved with was about constructing the actual journey as ride or amusement entertainment.
Rick Carter designed the movie, and the job that he was faced with was creating a theme park built in Costa Rica. So the theme park had to kind of echo the local cultural design sensibilities of what we might adapt in an environment like that.
Working with Rick Carter was great because he was so generous with giving me so many areas to get involved with, you know, again, from the storyboarding to props and vehicles and sets and all that. There's the scene where Nedry goes out into the jungle at night, and we had to get something for him to put the DNA in. It just said in the script, it just said a shaving can. So I went over to Laurel Canyon, the Long's Drugs down there, and I went through the different aisles, and I found a Barbasol can of shaving cream. At the time, I liked the name, and I liked how it graphically it stood off from the shelf from the others, and so just as a whim, this became the can that Nedry used.
There's enough coolant inside for 36 hours.
No menthol?
So you can see, take the top off, and the guys down the shop did a cool mechanism for it. I think that's a compsognathus right there. Very cool.
Quiet, please. Rehearsal.
I think the first time we saw one of Stan's dinosaurs, we were filming at Kauai. It's a scene where we wander out and there's a sick triceratops which is breathing, and you could go right up to it and its skin was all wrinkly and real. It was extraordinary.
That was one of the cases where there was a dinosaur there, full size, laying down, and the 7 or 8 people who were operating it were unseen, kind of hidden from the actor's immediate view. And one person was working the blinking eyes and the tongue and the breathing body. And when we first came upon this thing, wow, it looked real.
It was kind of a defining moment for us because this was the first dinosaur to really be put on film. And it was the first dinosaur to interact with all the actors.
And action.
And, we were very confident in what we were doing, but at the same time, there's a pressure. It's your baby. You're unveiling this to everyone.
Oh, wow.
You show up and you're just kind of taken aback a second because it's so lifelike. It's so real. You feel the energy from it. And you kind of don't want to even get too close. But when you kind of get more comfortable, all you want to do is put your hands on it and just touch it and see is this real? How is this? Even the texture, the feeling of it. I just remember being blown away.
You're right. There's no trace of lilac berries.
I think Steven gets a kick out of that. My dream was to work with Steven Spielberg. And so for 20 years now, at any restaurant I've ever been in, there's a child under 10 that comes up to me and says, "Are you the lady who stuck her hand in the dinosaur poopy?" That is the question I get most commonly in my career.
Thanks. What are her symptoms?
Oh, imbalance, disorientation, labored breathing.
When I did my scene with the Triceratops, I also had the great privilege of working as an actor alongside Jerry Mullen, who is in that scene with me. And because he's one of the crew, having started in other capacities before producing, he knew how to run a set. And we could have never shot in the difficulties and the limitations of Kauai. We could have never done it without Jerry.
And then about 3 weeks in, Hurricane Aniki came in. We turned up for work one morning, and we were told, we're not going to work today because there's a hurricane coming in. Actually, it seems to be heading straight for us.
The hurricane hit dead on. Landfall was our hotel, and it was a Category 5 hurricane, sustained winds of 165 miles an hour with gusts to 185, and the hurricane lasted for 9 hours. I'll never forget when the eye of the storm passed directly over the hotel. We got out and looked up. It was beautiful, blue sky above, and just a wall of white clouds surrounding the hotel, slowly moving about like this. I'd never seen anything like it before. It was a special effect.
We were confined to the ballroom of the hotel we were staying in. Apart from the fact that it was slightly exciting, a lot of it was rather boring.
And then that night, we camped out and figured out where we were going to stay as all the lights were off. I remember Steven Spielberg, he had the flashlight. He was going, "I'll show you how lighting changes a story. Horror story, love story. Horror story, love story." And then we woke up the next morning when the sun came up, seeing the devastation. It was amazing.
It was interesting to see that all the skills that go in to creating the community that makes a movie ended up creating the community that ended up really helping everybody after an event like that.
And it really changes a dynamic on a movie when you've survived something together. And I have never felt prouder as a member of a crew that I was privileged to work with than on the day of the hurricane.
Richard Attenborough slept through the whole thing. I have to commend him. When the hurricane passed, I said, "Dickie, you slept through the whole hurricane." He said, "Oh, dear boy, darling, I survived the Blitz." So this was nothing compared to the Blitz. That's a true story. I love this guy.
Go.
I don't think it's ever quite a relief to be on a movie set. I always love to be on location. I think there's an energy that comes from being actually in the jungle. But there's no question with a movie like Jurassic Park, eventually you're going to have to be on stages. It's just impossible to have these huge, huge pieces of equipment, and you need the infrastructure in place to keep them going.
So we opted to build big jungles on the stages at Universal so that we could do rain, nighttime, and not have to worry about all of the stuff that happens working in a natural environment.
It was great being on the stages because they were recreating, through our set design, beautiful sections of jungle, and it actually marries quite well into what we shot in Hawaii.
Dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution, have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together. How can we possibly have the slightest idea of what to expect?
I storyboarded every shot at Jurassic Park. I came up with all my shots. I had a little lipstick camera. It was called a lipstick cam, about this big. I put it on a stick, and I had a model car and a model T-Rex, and I had the kids in the car. And I actually found my angles by watching a television monitor. And I'd move the camera around until I liked an angle, and then we would record my camera move. And I put the whole sequence together that way on video, gave it to Phil Tippett. Then he did an entire stop-action carbon copy of the angles I was finding with the live cam.
We had the storyboards, two-dimensional storyboards, and they were very inspirational, done by David Lowery, just a beautiful job. But because of the complexity of Jurassic Park, and because there were so many disciplines being involved that had to be married seamlessly, Steven thought it might be a good idea to do animatics. And so we at Tippett Shop did the animatics for two sequences. One was the Raptor kitchen. The other was the T-Rex main road sequence.
There had to be performance crossover between the computer graphics and the Stan Winston live action characters. So coming up with, we call it the Dinosaur Bible, that just showed some of the basic performance parameters. Here's what the thing looks like walking. And here's what the thing looks like running. You know, here's what it does when it leaps in and looks over here. And
all of this came together as a common reference, a template for everyone on set.
So when we went and shot Stan's dinosaurs, there was nothing wasted. There was not a single shot that I was able to capture that I didn't use in the movie. And then we would just shoot a plate for a shot that ILM would later put in of the full-size digital dinosaurs. So in that sense, I followed the storyboards religiously.
You feel that?
One of the things that Steven is so good at is finding images that represent the story, the emotion the audience is supposed to be experiencing. One of the great ones in Jurassic Park is the glass of water that ripples when the dinosaur is approaching.
I was at work, and Steven calls into the office, and he goes, "I'm in the car, Earth, Wind, and Fire is playing, and my mirror is shaking. That's what we need to do." He goes, "We need to do that. We need to shake the mirror, and then I want to do something with the water." So the mirror shaking was really very easy. Put a little vibrating motor and shook it. But the water was another story. It was a very difficult thing to do. You couldn't do it. I had everybody working on it. And finally, messing around with a guitar one night, I set a glass and started playing notes on a guitar and got to a right frequency, a right note, and it did exactly what I wanted it to do.
On some levels, 90% of the feeling of the mass and weight of the T-Rex was Gary Rydstrom.
Maybe it's the power trying to come back on.
As the sound guy, I loved the introduction of the T-Rex. It's like a sonic boom. So we're hearing this thing coming for the longest time. And when he finally shows up, the footsteps are used for them. We recorded people cutting down huge redwood trees. The hit of the tree against the ground had this weight and sounded perfect for T-Rex footsteps.
Turn it off!
One, two, three. Cut. Good. Perfect. Excellent.
I mean, sure, it was challenging, but I was never having a terrible time or even losing my voice, interestingly enough, and I got so many questions after that. How could you keep screaming, Ariana? I was okay.
We're going to dedicate this scream to you.
Please.
Because
please.
you did the first good scream ever in the history of movies.
Is
ever.
that right?
Ever.
Did I get credit for that? Isn't that amazing?
You should be part of the Foley tracks all around Hollywood. The best scream ever.
They used it a lot.
I think she studied you somehow because she's got the kind of range.
Okay, Steven.
Okay, and Lex, and action. Okay, cut.
Cut it.
That's good. That's
Seeing the T-Rex for the first time, wow. I mean, what an impact. The size of the teeth, the way the eyes could move, it was incredible.
It's one thing seeing a great big model, but a model that moves and breathes and works with you was something else.
You can build a dinosaur and make it look real, but the people that bring it to life are the puppeteers, and they were the unsung heroes of Jurassic Park 1, 2, and 3.
And we had worked out this great telemetry system where we had almost like a replica of like the head of it here down to the tail. And it was exactly in 1/5 scale, so all the movement that we would do would translate to the big one in real time.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
It was pretty groundbreaking because it was a real hands-on puppeteering performance. All the puppeteers, we really had to rehearse and become in sync before we started filming. You know, everyone had to know what they were doing and to work in concert.
Unfortunately, I didn't know you couldn't pour water on the dinosaurs, so I suddenly decided to do the entire main road attack in rain. And Stan did his funny clearing of his throat. You know, I didn't exactly design these things for water. And I said, well, Stan, what happens if we get them wet? He said, nobody knows. And I don't want to find out. And I said, well, Stan, this sequence will be so much better in the rain because we won't see the T-Rex that well. We'll be in the car. There'll be water running down the windows. The T-Rex will look into the window. You'll sort of see him, but you'll also see a lot of rain coming down. We need to do this whole sequence in the rain. And so Stan said, well, look, hey, I'm a gambler. Let's try.
Hey, camera mark.
The way it was calibrated, it was for its motion so that it would move properly and smooth. It was calculated on the weight that it was. So when the rain bars came on and it started getting wet, the skin, which was foam rubber, in some areas was this thick, started soaking up water. So then the T-Rex weighed a lot more than what it was originally built for, and all the tolerances were now off.
I knew something was wrong with the T-Rex when the T-Rex was suddenly actually shaking, the way you shake when you're cold. And the T-Rex would actually just sit there and vibrate like that. And suddenly all of Stan's kids would run in with big chamois he used at the car wash, and they're slapping the rain off the T-Rex and trying to dry it off.
My God, that was a bit of a nightmare. But fortunately, we overcame that.
the main dinosaurs are usually a combination of different animals that provide different elements of the sound. So the T-Rex roar is layered, different animals taking care of different pitches. So the deep elements are crocodiles and lions. I wanted to not use lions because they're cliche, but you gotta use lions. Lions have that great attack. But the key individual sound for the T-Rex roar that we found was a baby elephant. He did the most amazing screech.
Hey! Jeff's part was written kind of nerdy mathematician who is always chatting up girls, annoys me because he's chatting up my girlfriend, you know. And then at the first sign of trouble runs away. Well, Jeff turned up and he didn't look nerdy at all. He was magnificent. He'd buffed up. He was Superman.
And in that scene, it was written in the script that my character does what something similar to the lawyer who kind of just freaks out, is so frightened that he escapes to save himself, and that my character does the same thing. I said, Stephen, on the day I ran it by him, then on the day I said, maybe it might be more delicious and offer a little variety if I can do something kind of heroic, like get the dinosaur to chase me so that it diverts attention away from Sam Neill and the kids so that they can get away.
Next thing I know, I'm out there with the flare, and Jeff's there with the flare too.
Ian, freeze! Get the can!
That's the way we did it. I had a little impact on that. I like that.
It was a very different character in the end. He gets heroically wounded.
But in any case, it was always determined that the lawyer was going to die.
No.
We have nothing against lawyers, by the way.
Thank you.
And cut. Very good.
What species is this?
It's a velociraptor.
You bred raptors.
I didn't know anything about velociraptors until Michael Crichton introduced me to his velociraptors. And Michael did tons of research, as he always does for all of his projects. So he really wanted those velociraptors to be smart, like dolphins with claws and teeth and rending power, and he really created these awesome villains.
I will never forget when we did the scene in the basement when I turned the lights back on. And this guy comes out at me, and I turn and see him.
Mr. Hammond, I think we're back in business.
I was screaming for my life. And obviously, yes, you're allowing your imagination to be stretched in terms of it being real, but it was very easy to be terrified.
And then, of course, the velociraptors. I mean, when I saw those for the first time, I was just like, we have our villain. Because that was just the scariest looking thing I've ever seen.
I didn't want these kids attacked in the jungle. I wanted these kids being attacked in the world of the familiar. And so it was very important to me that there were little iconic references to things we can see in our own homes in that sequence to put those kids in jeopardy.
In the kitchen scene, Stan and his guys created the most extraordinary raptors, and they operated very much like puppets.
The raptor was real personal for me. I was in a suit, as Crash was too, but I'm the one that comes into the kitchen and it hoots for the other one to call, and then Crash comes around the corner. So we trained to be in these suits, which were pretty crazy, actually.
John Rosengrant and I were both, tucked inside these things, and it was exhilarating but torture at the same time. It was kind of scary because there's that claustrophobic kind of feeling, and there's a little monitor in your face, and that would go out, and so you'd be blind and just kind of hoping you're doing the right thing.
But when we had events happen, like when the raptor had to leap up onto the counter, that was where we knew that if we could somehow find that motion in computer-generated graphics, it would look that much more real.
And so that's a great sequence showing basically all the tools working, every one of them.
But the raptor was one of the more fun creatures to do because he's such a bad guy. And it, like the baby elephant part of the T-Rex, the key sound for the raptor turned out to be a dolphin.
And these are different dolphins up the keyboard.
And by adding those to something low frequency, so we use walruses mostly. Use the walrus for the low frequency and the boy dolphin for the high frequency, and that became the attack scream of the raptor.
The shot I love the most is the shot where the dinosaur thinks it's Lex, which is a meal, climbing into a small compartment, and that the audience thinks that Lex is exposed to this attack. In fact, it's a reflection. Those were the fun discoveries I was making in the storyboarding process, because when I'm storyboarding, I just make up a lot of stuff, which is fun to do.
Every surface in that kitchen was reflective. So it was a very, very meticulous process of putting lights to create the mood, and then putting up large black cloths to hide the reflection of the light.
I remember being on set for the kitchen scene and looking behind one of the counters or whatever and seeing about 15 people, all operating a different part of the raptor. It was like a symphony.
During the scene with the raptors in the kitchen, Steven, what he wanted was for me to absolutely let loose, go crazy when I was running towards the door to push it closed and save my brother. He said, "Scare us."
Well, what was interesting is with the new technology, it allowed you to do facial replacement. And when Lex fell through the vent system and was holding on, that was actually the stunt person. And then they filmed Ariana Richards looking up, and they put that in and replaced the stunt double's head.
I like the juxtaposition of the fact that dinosaurs have come back to life and they're roving within a kind of museum of natural history. So you've got the fossil record, and then you've got the evidence of the hubris of science, dominating and perhaps wiping out all memory of the fossil record at the very end.
There's a shot of me sort of hanging from a skeleton, and I remember Steven crawling down on the floor and looking up at me as I was hanging from this, and he was like, 4 hours of hanging from a bone. You wanted to be an actress.
And then the sequence at the end, I remember the bones are supposed to be falling down on me, and they did that reverse, so I had to actually act in reverse, which was the whole new thing for me. Then I remember watching it in the movie theater and saying, hey, look at that, it works.
We went to a bowling alley and recorded the impact of the ball on the pins really close, and it made this clacky sound that was great. And it turns out, sounds perfectly like fossil bones collapsing. So the raptor is a teenage dolphin, and the T-Rex is a baby elephant, and the collapsing fossils is a bowling alley. So if you think of it that way, it has no impact at all. So don't think of it that way.
Originally, the raptor was going to have his kind of final say-so in the movie.
And the raptors go up and they shake all these bones, and for some reason all the bones fall down, and a rib goes through one of the raptors, and raptors in the teeth of the Tyrannosaurus skeleton. It falls to the ground and it crushes them.
We were so taken by how powerful the scenes were dramatically. Whenever the T-Rex was in them, he was like our star. That Steven called Rick Carter over, and we started to talk about how we were going to keep the power of the T-Rex alive throughout the end of the movie.
He said, I've got to have the T-Rex back. And I said, well, how does it get in? Now, I was thinking, how does it get in the building? What he said was, well, Grant's backing up, and the raptors are coming forward, and one of the raptors jumps in the air, and this T-Rex comes in and grabs it. And I just cracked up because he described how the T-Rex got into his movie, not how it got in the building, from the top of the frame.
You just needed something like that, something like really big. So he had it all worked out, how like the Tyrannosaurus would come in like the cavalry and save the day.
I wanted the movie to end with the T-Rex having killed the last raptor doing that heroic King Kong-esque roar. And I thought it would be great to let the banner, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, fall, because it was an irony.
I think it's a great ending to us be saved by one of the things that's trying to eat us.
I would have to say that saying goodbye at the end was the only part that was sad, because we had grown close, and what more enjoyable thing could I have been doing but going to the set every day and working with Steven and all these great people and creatures for all those months. It was a magical time.
I was 100% confident that we were going to be able to bring dinosaurs back to life in a very credible way, because they were so flawless and fluid, you know, from the original tests that Dennis Murin and ILM had made for me. I just didn't know whether the audiences were going to buy the reemergence of dinosaurs in the 20th century. I just wasn't sure that concept, despite the popularity of Michael Crichton's book, was going to be as effective as a movie. I hoped it would, and I certainly was, you know, had my fingers crossed. But you never know about these things. You know, the audience decides for themselves.
You know what this is? It's a dinosaur egg. The dinosaurs are breeding. I found a way.
The scary thing about Jurassic Park is we weren't seeing these shots finished until we were well finished with shooting the movie. So it wasn't a matter of being able to say, gee, that could be better. Let's go back to Hawaii and redo this shot. We had to rely on the fact that it was going to work.
Every time we worked on a shot, it was better than what we'd done before, literally the day before. So we were learning as we were going along. And we didn't know how close we could get on these. Like I said, we started out as a stampede with a lot of animals in the distance, then we got to being able to, let's try a full Brachiosaurus.
As we started to see the very first images, the first one was the giant brachiosaur eating the leaves off of the tree, the very first images that, in fact, our characters see too.
This thing doesn't live in a swamp.
This thing's got, what, a 25, 27-foot neck? Brachiosaurus 30.
And we worked on it a lot to get everything in place, to get the animal there, to get it rigged and textured to look like it was an actual solid thing. And then we did all the comping. It was digitally composited, so there were no matte lines or anything. And it was pretty shocking.
We looked at that and said, oh, my goodness. That is amazing, and that's what, you know, we're here for. And I think one of my satisfactions about Jurassic Park is we'd use this computer technology in the service of storytelling.
They're moving in herds. They do move in herds.
And we were all as surprised as anybody we could do it. If you'd asked us that like 4 months ago, could we do it? It seemed like probably not. Something's going to go wrong, but we did it. And then from then on, it was doing it for the rest of the shots in the show over the next 5 months or so.
While I was in principal photography on Schindler's List in Krakow, Poland, probably 4 times a week I was having big satellite teleconferences with the effects folks at ILM, and I was having to approve and make adjustments in all the effect shots. They could hear me, I could hear them, we couldn't see each other, but I had the images in real time right in front of me, and I could make all my value judgments that way. But for me, honestly, personally, if I had the choice, I would not have chosen to bifurcate my attention between Schindler's List and Jurassic Park, because that in itself was a very bipolar experience for me, to be shooting the story of the Holocaust and at the same time getting these effects of dinosaurs from an entirely different kind of a motion picture genre to look believable to audiences.
There's a couple different approval processes that we need. One is the performance, right, of the creature. So we would usually do a wireframe in the computer graphic just over the background so that Steven could see how he's moving, but it didn't look at all real. Then we might do one that's a little harder, like plastic shelled, that you could see it even better. And then once we sort of had the animation looking right, then we would get into the actual renders
and making the creature look like a solid object and moving right, then putting that into the background with all the different, layers of rain and smoke and haze that we needed to do too. That meant that everybody was seeing the progress we were making in the reality, including us. And it was literally, we didn't know we could do this. And okay, yes, we can. And we fed that back to Stephen as he saw him, and he got bolder with the shots, and I got bolder with the shots. And by the end of the show, yeah, we can do a close-up of the Tyrannosaurus. So Stephen comes up with this shot of two raptors jumping on the T-Rex. Something that we never, ever thought a month and a half earlier that we could have done.
I was very, very interested and determined to have Jurassic Park not only have digital dinosaurs, but have the first digital soundtrack. And I pretty much said if Exhibition wants to run Jurassic Park, they're going to have to put in a DTS sound system so they could really hear the movie the way it was intended to be heard.
Well, the final mix was full of fun to do sound moments throughout. There's a lot of things in the movie. There's rain, there's a lot of things that are in addition to the dinosaurs. It's an action movie. It takes place in an exotic locale, so great ambiances and birds and vehicles. The T-Rex attack, the main road attack, no music, and it's all raining. So we had rain on every different surface you can imagine, including felt hat. What made it more difficult was Steven Spielberg was shooting Schindler's List when we were final mixing Jurassic Park. So he was on the set of Schindler's List. How he kept both those films in his mind, I don't know.
What's really fun to me sometimes is just having something on a keyboard and performing it almost like music and watching the picture and giving it a try and seeing how it works.
Gary Wrightsman, Gary Summers were my sound guys on Jurassic Park. And they pretty much were left to their own creative devices. But I would travel on weekends from Krakow to Paris, and Gary Wrightsman would meet me at a re-recording studio in Paris, and he would preview all the reels that he had mixed in California. So I really was watching the evolution of Jurassic Park coming together when I would listen to it and give notes on all the dub reels.
It wasn't an ideal scenario as a filmmaker, but he's an extraordinary leader when it comes to organizing the way in which you can really shift your focus from one to the other.
I was very involved, of course, as I am with all of my pictures with John Williams, and this was a great experience for both of us, but it was the only time in, I think, our many, many decades together that I was not able to attend the scoring sessions for Jurassic Park because I was making Schindler's List in Poland. So I had to receive the little cassettes and play them for myself.
What I recall about the introduction of the music associated with the animals is the first time the humans see them, a woman and a man, I think, and we have a long shot of this creature, which is actually very beautiful. What I try to do with the music is to give a sense of wonder and maybe even with a slight sense of religiosity in this way we would be acculturated to these harmonies and so on, so that the orchestra makes a beautiful statement, that almost like you would enter a cathedral, maybe. So that was certainly clear in Stephen's interpretation of that thing, and I certainly remember that particular musical moment as being one that was an opportunity to do just that, to give a sense that these animals were magnificent.
Johnny had previewed the main themes on the piano before I left for Poland, so I knew in principle what the Jurassic Park theme was going to be like, what the Raptor music was going to sound like, and it all sounded great on the piano. And so I was really thrilled when the richness and the depth of that score just really filled my car ride to the location every day. I would actually put the cassette in the car and listen to Johnny's score going to and from location in Poland.
I remember particularly the kitchen scene, which is one of the most terrifying scenes I think I've ever seen in a film. And it's scored in a very operatic and dramatic way. And the gestures being operatic, meaning maybe a little bit larger than life, the whole idea was just that. So it was an opportunity again for me to sort of push the orchestral buttons to the limit. That's, for me, part of the great fun and the swashbuckling aspect of what one can do with an orchestra with these kinds of movies.
Just to listen to it and be like, well, this is unbelievable. This really is just like a beautiful piece of music, with or without the movie attached. But then when you see it with the movie and the way, you know, that it enhances moments like by like tenfold, you know, just suddenly it's a whole new level of magic.
The whole year became kind of like a fever dream in a strange sense. I think I used every ounce of intuition making Schindler's List, and I think I used every ounce of craft to make Jurassic Park. And I think somewhere inside my brain there was a small nuclear explosion. And those final months are very blurry to me. I don't have a lot of real lucid recall to share with you what happened in those final months of post on Jurassic Park.
When I saw the film, when he screened it for us for the very first time, it took my breath away. I cried when I saw that image, you know, when the camera pans after I've looked up.
We had a Royal Command performance in London, and I sat beside Princess Di. So it was very interesting to watch her, and I think there's a scary bit coming now. Let's see if she jumps, and she'd jump out of her skin. That was, yeah, she was lovely, actually.
Kids come up to me all the time, and their parents, and they go, you know, I've seen you 170 times because my child has to put it on every single night. They watch the same movie. It's like Howard Hughes, I forget, he watched one movie every day, didn't he? A movie like this turns all kids into mad, crazed OCD nutcases. They can't stop watching the same movie.
I remember being in the theater, scared to death, when Laura Dern says, we're back in business, and the raptor comes up to the fence behind her. I was able to be an audience member and actually feel it the way it was supposed to be felt. Ah, boy, there's nothing like walking out of that movie.
I know this. It's all the files of the whole park.
I was glad looking back on it after reading Michael Crichton's book and then seeing how my part was changed for Jurassic. Instead of being the younger sister and then the older brother, it was the older sister and the younger brother, and I got to have the expertise in the computers. And I think that inspired a lot of young girls as well to see, okay, I can actually do something that has to do with computers or mathematics and technology and be really effective.
You got it! Yes!
I definitely look back at Jurassic Park as being the moment when the explosion actually happened. And that's what was so thrilling to be around, because every one of the players, for all their technical prowess, we all led with our emotions in our heart. And I think that's the part that shows up in the movie. I think that the technology is warm in the movie. And I think there's a reason for that, and that's because the process of who was involved.
Just think of it as kind of a big cow.
Of many of the films I've worked with Steven on, Jurassic was a paradigm shift in terms of recognizing that something had happened in the history of movies, that the way in which we see things, the way in which we can execute things, the ability for your imagination to take that next step toward realizing things that couldn't have been realized as realistically before, that had definitely happened with Jurassic Park.
Every movie that I've made has been a learning opportunity. You know, I've learned so much. And you can only learn if you take chances by doing things that no one's ever done before. You can't learn if you just do something that's in standard use. And Jurassic Park was no exception. We all learned so much about how to make that kind of a movie. We had never done anything like Jurassic Park. My favorite dinosaur has always been the Triceratops. 3 horns are better than 1.
Think they'll have that on the tour?